Fascinating subject, and we've loved working on it. We've had some great help though from people who contribute their grandparents contributed to the industry. One of those is Gráinne McGilligan, who travelled down from Naas today with her family. Gráinne holds her grandmother's collection from the Thomond lace industry, and it's just great that she was able to come here tonight. In the late 1890s, Limerick Lace was on its knees, and one lady, Florence Vere-O'Brien, more or less rescued the industry and made sure it transferred, for another couple of generations. So we're delighted, really, here tonight to be able to welcome Veronica Rowe, the granddaughter of Florence Vere-O'Brien. That's Florence Vere-O'Brien School there, who came down tonight to speak to you. She's also the author of the only other work on Limerick Lace. So can I introduce you to Veronica Rowe?
Well, good evening. This is an amazing event to be here, and I'm so thrilled to be here. My grandmother loved Limerick. She loved the Limerick people. She loved the people who worked for her in the school, and she would have been so thrilled to see what's happened here today, that this is being given such enormous publicity. So it's really quite an exciting event. And somebody said to me the other day, how could this English woman come here to France, to Limerick, to do all this? And it's really quite simple. All you have to do is marry an O'Brien. You know what that leads on to. Anyway, she came over here. She had a very interesting history because her parents both died when she was quite young. They'd worked in India, and she was left as an orphan. And she was adopted by her aunt, who was a sister of Matthew Arnold, the poet. So she was brought up in a very cultured and very interesting background in England, and she travelled a lot, and she was very artistic. And he was given a position as the Chief Secretary of Ireland. That was W.E. Forster, who was her adopted father, came to Ireland, and one of the first places he came down to was to visit, where is my friend Matthew, Lord Emily, who lived in Turbo House, which is now gone. And at a party given by Lord Emily, who did she meet? But Robert O'Brien, who was a young barrister. And so they corresponded for about 5 years, and eventually she married him and came to Limerick in 1883, and that was the occasion in which she walked down the steps of the station in Limerick, and she saw these elderly ladies selling little bits of lace, beautifully sewn but on really very poor material. And she decided that what she was going to try and do was improve the quality of the material, and after that she set up this Limerick Lace school, which was really, what was valuable about it was the fact that she was a very artistic lady and a very, very good designer. Quite by chance, we have recently found a whole portfolio of her drawings and paintings, which are quite remarkable, and these are the next thing we're going to work on. But it was because she was so talented that really she put up the standard of the lace design, and as the previous speaker said, they were competing against enormous numbers of people making lace in Belgium and other parts of the world, so they had to be really good, and the medals which you have seen, they won in various competitions. So that's really what I want to say this evening, that she did bring something to Limerick, and she would have been so pleased to see all that's happened here this evening. So hopefully it will renew an interest in the industry, and people will go and look in your attics and see what you can find. And I would particularly like to thank Jacqui and her group here, what they've done here is quite remarkable. Thank you very much.
Matthew is the historian with Limerick Archives, and we're very lucky to have the benefit of his scholarship in approaching exhibitions and works like this. So can I hand you over to Matthew?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jackie. So, Deputy Mayor of Calais, Deputy Mayor of Limerick, and distinguished guests, Reverend Fathers, and so on. It's a great privilege for me to be here tonight at the launch of Amazing Lace, a history of the Limerick Lace industry, written by myself and edited by Jacqui Hayes. Now, I suppose on a slightly personal note, it's a project that's been very close to my heart because for over 40 years I've had an abiding interest in the decorative arts, particularly in the history of clothes and fashion. This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to undertake serious academic research in the area, and for that I'm very, very appreciative and very grateful. Now, lace is a very interesting fabric. Nowadays it is associated with women's wear, but in past centuries it was worn as much, if not in fact more, by men than it was by women, and indeed there are some fine images in the book of men wearing lace in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Now, it has to be said that some women did not necessarily approve of their menfolk wearing lace. When Queen Isabella of Spain was asked why had she become estranged from her effeminate husband, King Francis, she replied, "What shall I say of a man who on his wedding night wore more lace than I did?" However, this is only part of the story, for in fact lace was as much a part of men's wear in the 16th to 18th centuries as a shirt and tie would be nowadays. Even after men in general stopped wearing lace in the early 19th century, it continued to be worn as part of ceremonial dress by the Catholic and Anglican clergy until the 1960s, as we've already heard. Now, Limerick Lace was one of the greatest craft industries in Irish history, and one of the most famous and beautiful laces in the world. So researching its history was a fascinating experience. And I suppose one of the most interesting sources that, Damien rightly mentioned that there was a lot of very interesting sources, but one of them was the contemporary accounts by visitors such as Mr. and Mrs. Hall, who came to Limerick in 1841, and Lord John Manners, who came a few years later. And what's so interesting was that their accounts of Limerick Lace were actually fairly contrasting. And I suppose I don't want to single people out to thank, because so many people were involved in this project, and if I mention some people, I undoubtedly will forget to mention others, and then I'll be in trouble. But I do want to mention a few people. I want to pay the warmest tribute to my colleagues in the Limerick Museum and Archives, namely Jacqui Hayes, Brian Hodkinson, Sharon Slater, John Crowley and Ed Myers, who were always so helpful and cooperative throughout this project, and it was and it continues to be a pleasure to work with such a friendly and such a welcoming, such a hard-working team. And I suppose lastly, on a very personal note, I cannot forget my family, my wife Colette, who's here tonight, my son Alex, my daughter Anna, who have found better things to do than to be here tonight, my mother-in-law Mary, and my brother Michael, who's also here tonight. And they've all had to live with Limerick Lace for several months whilst it's been researched and written, and they are happier than anyone, I can tell you, especially my wife and children, that is being completed and being launched tonight. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you. It's even if I'm not a professional of speech, even in French, so I want to know you too long with my English. I want to thank particularly the City of Limerick and the Culture Department to have invited the City of Calais to that big event, and I want to congratulate Mr. Potter and you, Jacqui, for the magnificent book about Amazing Lace. I will tell you a short story. Also, I want to apologize for the result of the rugby last weekend. I can easily do it because Clermont is far away from Calais and they never invited me to any event. So. I'll tell you a short story about the history of lace in Calais. At the beginning of the 18th of the 19th century, Napoleon decided a blocus against Great Britain. And all the factory of lace was situated in England at the time, main part of them in Nottingham. And at the factory couldn't export lace to Europe, they decided to export the looms. And the first destination was the city of Calais, because the looms were very heavy, so they crossed the channel and they installed all the machines in Calais. That's how starts the history of lace in Calais. As the mayor said, in the 1950s, lace industry employed around 10,000 people in Calais, so it was very, very big industry. And it started to go down in the 60s, 70s, and now, today, there's still 3 factories. There was 200 in the 1950s. There are 3 factories employing around 700 people. What I want to say is, a lot of people think that lace is an old material and it's quite dead, but it's false. We work a lot with new creator in fashion, new designers, and a lot of them use lace. So I think we have a good hope to make that industry growing up in the next year. And I think it's very interesting to have that kind of book, the book we celebrate today, to make everyone remember the roots and not forget your past, and also inspire of the past to make the future. I hope that my day was very full today. I visit a lot of things, meet a lot of people, but I think we can make good connection for the future around the common past with lace. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Just to round up, really, I wanted to say a few very quick thank yous, because you've all been very patient. Just thank you to Matt, Dr. Matt Potter, to Sharon Slater, who sourced all the images for the book. And it's great that a lot of museums and archives are now making their images available free of charge. You just need to show the references, but it's a major job to track them down, but it's worth it because the book is full of beautiful illustrations. So thank you, Sharon. To Brian Hodkinson and his team in the museum, Mila and John, I mean, there's just been fantastic work here done all week. Thanks very much. They're great partners to work with. Thanks to the MESH team in the University of Limerick, who worked on the interactive display, which is over here in the corner. To Susanna Mellon, Gabriella Avram. It's great to see lace being thought of in new ways with digital design, 3D and so on, interactive lace. And we hope to explore that kind of thing into the future with the great project team. Thanks to Eileen McCaffrey. Eileen, I think, started a lace class 3 years ago and became besotted with lace and is now working with us. And it's great to have those connections with lace makers, actual connections, rather than it just being history on its own. It's great that it's active. Thanks to Francis Nevin. Francis undertook a survey of lace, actually, nationally in 2013, and has been very helpful to us in our research. And to Giordana Ghiash, who works with, which is doing a master's in LSAD and is a member of the project team, and we hope to do a lot more work next year with LSAD. Thanks also to Maura Cronin. She's a lecturer in history in UL, who just checked the book for us, read the book, so thanks very much, Maura. And just thanks to all the lace fraternity, the lace lovers around Ireland, who all gave up their lace and gave us advice. Thanks to all of them, Nora Finnegan, Veronica Stewart. They're not here tonight, but we're very grateful to them. Thanks to the designer of the book, Avid Design. They did a fantastic job and were wonderful to work with. And thanks to the custodians of lace, to Veronica Rowe and to Gráinne McElligott. So just to finish up, I think a major theme of the book really was that lace was an industry. In most other parts of Ireland, it was a charitable venture. So Limerick stands alone, really, that it was an actual industry employing 1,500 women. It's incredible to think of it in the scale of something like Dell in the modern age. Dell was wonderful, but back then, in 1829, we were only 20 years from the famine. The cash that came into those homes was absolutely vital. It was the difference between having bread and not having bread. So those 1,500 women must have sustained the city, really. So it's fantastic to be able to look back and recognise their work. So I suppose lace was really made by women. This is largely a women's story, I think. Made by women, worn by women. And that's why I think we chose that the front of the book would actually be of a woman actually making lace. There you have the industry, you have the women making it. So thanks to everybody for turning out tonight on what is a very cold night, and happy Christmas.
Thank you.